I'm going to be talking about the sort of, some of the growing pains, I guess, of OA, and also primarily the opportunities that it presents, in particular for institutions. I think it's an extremely exciting time for institutions, and I think there's some interesting discussions that need to be had about how it's adopted within the institution, within the academic community. I'm not normally a fan of these overview slides, but just kind of as a reminder of myself, we're going to be doing, I'll talk a little bit about the growth of OA. I'm up first, which means I get to show the slides of OA shooting upwards, and what that means for institutions, and then how we as a publisher are coping with that, and some of the challenges it presents, and then where that leads us. So here we go. Here is a slide showing the number of journals that are launching in new OA journals that are launching each year. As you can see, it's an extremely sharp increase, and similarly, it's a very international group of journals. Apologies, first of all, to people in Australia. I don't quite know why you got cropped off. But there are some, yes, there literally, pretty much every country now has OA journals, and a big density in Europe, which I was quite surprised when I saw that. And then in terms of articles, it's similar growth. Last year, I think it was just short of 90,000 OA articles published, and it will be much, much higher than that this year. And here is the growth of, and then here we go, this is the proportion of articles that are OA compared with the full corpus. It's quite a kind of sobering slide for us. I keep giving presentations about how PLOS One is the biggest journal in the world and how important we are, but that little blue sliver at the top does just reminds me that we are still only a very small drop in a very large pond. So there, but the growth is I think very well established now. I think a lot of people are talking about tipping points, and that we've now gone past the tipping point of OA adoption, which is extremely exciting for people like me. The OA, so OA offers incredible advantages to institutions. The obvious one is visibility. If your authors are publishing in OA journals, then the visibility is hugely increased beyond those people who can access the subscriptions to the entire world. And that's great for media attention. PLOS One gets daily mentions in all the big media outlets. I mean, we're extremely well covered in the press, as are lots of other OA journals, and I think we've had a big advantage from the fact that journalists can actually read the content. The research is obviously much more widely distributed, and especially in developing countries and the global south, we're seeing a huge increase in readership on research that they would have otherwise not had access to. And again, for institutions, that's a really important thing, I think. And finally, that the research is going beyond the academy, whereas previously everyone in institutions were able to read the research. It was rarely going beyond that. And just here's an example that I pulled out from, I think this is 2 or 3 weeks ago. Does anyone recognize this page? I'm interested to know how many people use Reddit. They call themselves the front page of the internet. And in fact, I think that's probably quite an accurate description. If PLOS One gets a article on the front page of Reddit, then our servers crash, essentially. This is one that we had a couple of weeks ago, and you say 140,000 views. And these aren't scientists, this is just the general public, this is just the interested public. In fact, you can see that on Reddit in particular, because you get comments written about the article. There's a brilliant comment there that has been upvoted, sort of pointing out that someone who spotted the flaw in the experiment was then removed from it because they kind of saw through the tag. But basically this is just showing that readers are not just in libraries and in institutions, that they are people at home in front of their computers who are genuinely interested in scientific research. And this is something that is, again, I think a fantastic step forward for science. And then the other thing, and I think probably the more practical use that institutions stand to gain from OA, is in terms of measurability of usage. So this is something that PLOS has pushed very strongly for the last few years, and other journals are doing likewise. The idea that you can actually measure the usage, the interaction that readers have with articles, actually at the article level rather than at the journal level. I'm not going to talk an awful lot about this, but this is an example of a page, a PLOS 1 paper. You can see that we have this metrics tab, and within that, I'm sure this arrow works. Okay, so yeah, you can see the number of views. This graph is just showing cumulative views. And then if you scroll down, this is actually a live link, but I'm not going to risk it, I think. So if you scroll down, you can see we measure citations, we measure the number of reference manager downloads to Mendeley. We also measure things like, how many times it's cited in Wikipedia, how many tweets it has, how many Facebook likes, And again, this is very different types of usage that you would see in the kind of traditional models of citations and journal impact factors. And I think it just goes to show that there is an awful lot more happening on articles that as an institution, it's extremely useful to see. And if your authors and your researchers are publishing in OA journals, then this is available to everyone, and you can get a much better insight into how the research from your institution is being shared across the world. And now a new thing that we've just brought in is about bringing those ALMs together. We've launched a website called ALM Reports, and the idea is that you actually can choose groups of papers and look at them together, look at the metrics for that group of papers together. So here, for example, I've just done a search of papers from UCL from 2012. You can also search by funder and other things like that. So this has huge benefits, as you can imagine. What you get is a summary of all the papers from that institution here. So it's 89 articles from UCL published in PLOS last year, and you can then visualize that. So this shows, all of that data pulled together and presented in a visual format. So this top graph shows over time the usage according to page views and also by citations. So as papers have been published for longer, then obviously the number of usage tends to trend upwards, as does the number of citations. And that's what we're seeing. The different colors, by the way, are different journals. So I think green is PLOS Biology, purple is Medicine, and orange is PLOS 1. So, to me, this is incredibly exciting. I mean, I look at that and the impact factor disappears. It no longer matters, because what you're looking at are different journals that have of different levels of selectivity. I mean, the overlap in itself is quite interesting. But the bigger thing is, as an institution, imagine if this was all the research from all journals, that you as an institution look at that and you can see individual papers and say, wow, look at that big one there, look at this, look at the, where are we seeing seeing the usage, and the where it was published becomes unimportant. And I think that is a huge step, and I think as these metrics become more adopted, then we will see institutions and funders using that an awful lot more. The one below is a similar graph, but it just shows Mendeley. Mendeley is an online reference manager. So it shows Mendeley downloads, the idea being that if you're downloading to a reference manager, it's a kind of early predictor of citation. Most of the time, if you're downloading, then it means that you will cite in the future. And there's actually evidence to show that it is a kind of early indicator. So yes, we're tracking that. Subject area, again, this is still slightly in beta and we need to work a little bit more, but the idea is that you can show where the areas are being covered, and also the usage, the gradient of green shows how much usage they're getting. So again, you can sort of see areas of particular interest. And then this is, the bottom one is just showing collaboration. So essentially, all these papers from UCL, or have an author from UCL, but they have obviously other authors in other parts of the world, and this map just shows the level of collaboration within your institution. So like UCL, obviously, it's very broad, but you do get some very interesting patterns emerging there. So again, from an institution point of view, from a funder point of view, it's a different league in terms of the information that you can now get on the research that your authors are publishing. And so the way I see it, that this is now an opportunity to reset the relationship between publisher and institution. I think in the past it has been heavily bias towards publishers, but now, the institutions have the opportunity to get publishing working for them rather than the other way around. The journals, journals are all doing their own thing to get to deal with the mandates and to comply with open access policies, and I think those will be the ones that are more successful in this. And then with the ALMs, the institutions are now in a position to actually look at the research itself rather than the journal title. Okay, I was going to briefly talk about some of the challenges that we've seen. This is the growth of PLOS One over the past 5-6 years. So this isn't cumulative. This is number of papers published per month on the journal. And as you can see, it's just been going up very fast. We're all very busy, and as such, it's presented all kinds of interesting challenges for us. I should point out, probably none of these are specific to open access, but I think they are specific to mega journals, as PLOS One has recently become known as, in that we don't have the option to send things away. If submissions keep coming in, we need to assess them on their scientific merit alone, and that means that it's very hard for us to get rid of things that are. If we're overwhelmed by papers, we have to deal with those papers. So that does present some really interesting and unique challenges. So the main one is maintaining quality. We have a series of checks that we do up front. When a paper comes in, we now have, I think, 12 staff editors. We have about 50 editorial assistants who all work on, when these papers come in, assessing them, make sure that things like everything, the completing interest are declared, financial disclosures are all very apparent. Ethical oversight is very important to us at PLOS One, and we spend a lot of time making sure that papers have high standards of research ethics, and the cell lines and things are all, we know where they're coming from, things like that. And then with the growth, what we're seeing is that the number of those issues has gone up. The growth internationally has led to a huge variation in sort of standards of ethical oversight. So, some countries just don't have institutional review boards, they don't have animal advisory groups, they don't have any of this infrastructure, whereas because our guidelines say that you need approval from these things, that has caused some significant challenges for us. But again, we see it's an interesting or good opportunity for us to try and sort of pull standards up in countries that have perhaps lower standards. The biggest challenge, of course, is that now that we're very big, we're very well known, we are more exposed to sort of damage to our reputation, and so it's very important for us that we do identify any issues up front, and we can deal with potential problems early. Peer review is, of course, a huge challenge. So we now receive 2,000 referee reports a week. And of course, for every one we get, there's several that we invite but don't receive. And so there is an awful lot of inviting to peer review going on just on PLOS One. And so that's presenting a challenge. Reviewers tend to only handle a certain number of papers from a particular journal in any one year. And they don't take into account the fact that this journal might represent 3% of PubMed or whatever. It's to them, it's just another journal. And so they're less willing to do a lot of PLOS One reviews. And so we are kind of competing with other journals for that reviewer's time. And that's a growing challenge, I think, as we get bigger. That challenge will only will increase, and so we're now looking at some of these new third-party peer review organisations that are coming up. There's a Peerage of Science, there's Rubric, these people who will essentially review a paper from a kind of very objective stance, and then they would submit, the author would then submit those reviews along with the paper, and we would then consider them along with the academic editor would consider them when they're assessing the paper. Portable peer review is something that we are very keen to do more of. The idea that if you submit a paper to maybe a high impact journal, if the journal says there's nothing wrong with this paper, it's just not right for us, we would, if it was then submitted to us, we would then take the reviews and we'd work with the original journal and actually take their reviews so that the comments get used. I mean, most of the time, they would just be thrown away, and we would start from scratch. But there's great use in using reviews that say a paper is generally fine, but just not high enough impact. For us, that's useful. So we're working with other journals, eLife, and EMBO and things to try and sort of come up with a better way of sharing these reviews across publishers. And then technically, obviously, we've had the growth has presented lots of challenges. We have we've developed a whole new custom taxonomy, and we're working on ways of sort of machine applying taxonomy terms to papers. Matching papers to people is probably our biggest challenge. We have 5,000 academic editors. We have I don't know how many thousand reviewers, and making sure that the right paper goes to the right person is a huge challenge, and we spend an awful lot of time on trying to make that process as automated as possible. Contributor engagement and education, again, is a big challenge. For 5,000 academic editors, making sure that they're being consistent in their decision-making is a big challenge for us, and we're spending a lot of time and effort on developing learning management systems and kind of online training platforms so that editors know our criteria, and when they're making the assessment that they're making the right decisions based on PLOS One's own criteria. And then also making sure there's plenty of oversight, plenty of feedback. So there's lots of work for the publisher to do here. These things don't just run themselves. I mean, you can't, unfortunately, just leave it up to the academics. And on a lot of things like publication ethics, these misconduct, plagiarism, things that we do see quite regularly. It is, I think, too much to expect an academic editor to make those decisions, and so it does require internal editorial staff. And then finally, we're trying to consolidate editorial processes as much as possible. We have 7 journals that all work in very different ways, and we're trying to make sure that they work together, and we can be as consolidate things as much as possible. Challenge of growth for institutions, I'm only going to briefly talk about because it's not really my area, and I know that there are speakers later on who will cover this in much more detail. But these are some of the things that I've heard, having spoken to librarians and people within institutions, some of the challenges that they're finding with these, some of the new RC UK mandates. The main one being that they have really got to avoid trying to push authors to publish in certain venues. They need to work with the authors. So the first question is always, where do you want to send this? And then they'll work out a way of making it compliant with RC UK mandates. A big problem is getting the message out. They have these funds available to them, but most academics don't actually know about them. One person said to me that if you got 10 academics in a room, maybe 3 of them would know about open access. I mean, there is clearly a long way to go in getting this message broadly out to academics. In faat, at UCL, I gave a talk at UCL last week, and they showed me this book that they're now handing out to all their research staff, which explains to them about the OA mandates, explains to them what is required of them, and what UCL can do to help, and especially sort of financial support. Ensuring publisher compliance is a really interesting issue that a couple of librarians have mentioned to me, that it's all very well sending your money off to a publisher, but they're finding that some publishers are still sticking them behind a paywall. And in fact, you then have to drill down, and you get to pages and pages of rights and licensing information to get to the bottom where it finally says, oh, and if you want an open access version, it's available. So institutions are finding they are having to sort of push publishers to make sure that they are complying with policy. And publisher deals and funds. Again, this is not really my area, but it's clearly going to be a fascinating time now as publishers try and work with institutions to get kind of their own funds that will support open access publication. And that is, I think, represents a big risk. I think that institutions have got to be careful they don't just essentially revisit the old subscription days where you get into these bundle packages with large publishers and end up sort of giving over a lot of money that isn't really necessary in order to kind of keep working with large publishers. So I know that's a kind of ongoing discussion. I'm sure there'll be lots of discussion about that today, but it represents, I think, quite an interesting challenge for the future. Okay. Okay, just a couple more slides actually. So from a publisher's point of view, it's very important that we work with other publishers. If we are working for institutions now, so let's say the days are gone where the institutions are sort of having to bend over backwards to work with the publishers, the way the balance of power has shifted, and all of a sudden publishers now have to work for institutions. And in order to do that successfully, they need to work together. And in fact, are doing so. I think there's lots of examples of groups who are being set up, third parties that are working with publishers to allow institutions to maximise the use of content. And these are just some that came top of my head last night. I forgot to mention COPE, actually. That's another one of, in terms of publishers, getting together and working very collaboratively to ensure that the institutions sort of get maximum gain from their content. Similarly, institutions need competition. It's no good just having PLOS One as the one journal to rule them all, unfortunately. And competition is very useful for, as in any industry, is an extremely important driver of service. So fortunately, in the mega journals world, there is lots of competition now. These are just a handful of the ones that have cropped up in the past few years, and they launch probably every new one every month, probably. So the kind of the OA mega journals are rapidly becoming more and more competitive, and as such, PLOS One it does have to compete and has to make sure it's as efficient, as cheap, as fast as it possibly can be. Just finally, some thoughts on the future. I sort of deliberately tried to be a little bit contentious here. I think it'd be interesting to get some debate about some of these things. So firstly, are the institutions just going to go along with, are they going to do the bare minimum to adhere to mandates? Or are they going to realise what an opportunity they have here? The open access gives them the ability to really understand what the research that's going on within their institutions, and to get much better information on that. So I think the mandates are great. It's pushing institutions to think very hard about this, but I think what is needed is for them to see, actually, this is in their interest. It's not just something that they have to do because the funders are telling them to. A big one for us, of course, the impact factor. I think it's the scourge of the industry, and I think every author you speak to asks me what PLOS One's impact factor is. It's so ingrained in their thinking, and it's so unfortunate when there is so much more. That the article level metrics offer you so much more, and it is unfortunate that I think everyone is still obsessed with these single journal level metrics. As I said previously, the way in which institutions and publishers work together will be fascinating, and I think it's important that institutions don't revisit those old days of bulk deals and very large kind of relationships, financial relationships with publishers that aren't in their best interests. And finally, that it feels to me the institutions have the power now. They hold the cards, and it's just the question is whether they will use that to their best advantage.